Hello, my name is Alex Cohen, and today I will show you a simple method to set up an EKS cluster in AWS. Then I will deploy Nginx onto the EKS cluster and expose it with load balancing so that Nginx is accessible to the open internet. Many guides out there will make this a very complex process, but I want to keep this as simple as possible for beginners and only give you a high-level overview. So we are going to create the EKS cluster, deploy Nginx onto it, and expose the Nginx service with load balancing using only 3 commands. So the first command we are going to use is EKSCTL, and we are going to use this to create our cluster on AWS. This will create the EKS resource and the instances to run your Kubernetes cluster on. So we will take a look at this cluster.yaml file that we are using to create our cluster, and you can see that it is a cluster config. The name of our EKS cluster will be basic cluster. It's going to be in US East 1. The nodes are going to be named NG1. They are going to be T2 micros because this is free. We are going to create 2 of them, disable private networking, and make sure that we can SSH into our nodes. So I have done this ahead of time because it takes about 15 minutes to spin up. So you can see that it has gone through, it has created our cluster, and it has pushed out my key to this. If we go to the EKS console, we can see that the basic cluster has been created. And going into this menu, we can get the basic information from this, from our certificates, our API endpoints, and our OpenID Connect provider URL. So the next step that we are going to do is going to be deploying Nginx onto this cluster. So you can see that it is run and it has created the deployment apps my Nginx. Now let's take a look at this to see what we created. So we have created a deployment, and this deployment is named my Nginx. We are creating 4 containers, and the containers we are creating are Nginx containers. We are exposing this on port 80 so that the Nginx service is accessible. So let's go ahead into the command line and let's take a look at this. So I'm going to run this show nodes and pods. So we're going to show our nodes on the command line, and we are going to take a look at our pods that we have available. So you can see that here we also get a display of our nodes, and we have our pods. We have seen that our containers are beginning to come up. And you will notice that these are internal IPs. This is not yet accessible to the open internet. So the last step that we're going to run is we are going to deploy this. And we're going to expose this, and we're exposing the deployment my Nginx. If you remember, we created a deployment, and our deployment is my Nginx. We're going to call this service my Nginx service. We are going to expose it on port 80, and this will be a load balancer. And that's it. You have deployed your EKS cluster. To take a look at where this is deployed to, we'll run our get service command, and you can see that it has given us an external IP. And this is actually a DNS resolution. Now we will have to wait a few minutes for this to come up. So I'm going to pause the video right here, and we'll come back in a few minutes when we can access this record. And now we're back. So we can see that our cluster is now accessible. If we try and hit that URL, you will find that we now get our Nginx landing page. And if we go ahead into a browser, you can see that it is accessible to the open internet as well. Thank you for watching.